welcome everybody to today's webinar between PFF and CPD on the basics of diversity statements. We're going to go ahead and jump right into introductions, just so you know who we are. Briefly, my name is Holly Eva Allen. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a PFF fellow and instructor, so I help PFF with pedagogy research, blogs, etc. And I also teach the 531 class. Currently I'm teaching 531, and I should be teaching 531 also in the spring. So that's me. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Michelle.
Great, thank you. I know most of the people on the screen, but my name is Michelle Ponce, and I am the Director of Career and Professional Development here at CGU. Absolutely love what I do. I'm so excited to work with you all on your own journey, your career journey as you're navigating your academic journey, as well as when you're an alumni. So, and I will pass it to my partner in crime, Ro.
All right. Hello. Thank you, Michelle. So my name is Ro Lee. I'm the CPD Associate Director. I'm here, and whatever Michelle doesn't do, I do. And she does a lot, by the way, so it makes my life easier. And we were just really thrilled to share these workshops, especially doing something in collaboration with PFF. So Holly, thank you for working with us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for working with PFF. All right, so now that we've got introductions out of the way, there's a few things that we should note. First is this session is recorded. We are currently recording, just so you know. However, the chat won't be captured and individual names won't be captured. Of course, if someone says your name aloud, then that'll be captured. Also, there's a poll that will be administered towards the close of the webinar, kind of towards the end. If you could fill that out for us, we'd really appreciate it. We use that feedback to make our future webinars even better, so thank you in advance. Finally, towards the end, you'll be provided with a worksheet that will assist you in crafting your own diversity statement. I believe it's also listed on the resources page of the PFF CGU page or website. But it can be accessed through the slides as well, which the slide link is in the chat. So that's just for your own future use. Finally, CPD has just been great with the QR codes. That's something PFF really should catch up with because we're certainly not in on that yet. But there will be recordings both through PFF and through CPD. So if you have to check out early, if something happens technology-wise, don't worry, you'll be able to catch what you missed. So no worries there. All right, and this is just a statement of our goals for this webinar. So really, what is this webinar trying to show? What are we trying to achieve? So first, and this is maybe the most apparent, is that we're trying to show what exactly a diversity statement is. So maybe if you've heard the phrase diversity statement, maybe you've heard of it, you've read it somewhere, but you're not really sure what it is. Hopefully that'll be clear by the end of the webinar. We're going to explore some terms associated with the diversity statement, just so everything is clear. We're going to give some definitions. And we're also going to prompt you to examine your own identities, your positionality, and your own lived experiences as you're considering, you know, what your position as a teacher, scholar, or leader is. So whether you're wanting to work in academia, whether you're wanting to work elsewhere in some professional field, but a diversity statement is required, that'll sort of prompt you to consider your own, you know, where you're coming from in terms of a diversity statement and how that might apply. And finally, we want you to consider ways that you teach, model, practice justice and equity and inclusion for diverse learners. So how are you going to approach the situation? What is your pedagogy, your management style in terms of diversity? You know, are you prioritizing inclusion, etc.? All right, and so now just to get started, I know I said that we would sort of let you know what a diversity statement is. But I'm just curious if anyone else has any thoughts or ideas. Maybe someone here already kind of knows what a diversity statement is. So I'm just sort of prompting you all to either use the raise hand function, or you can just enter it in the chat box if you're not comfortable talking out loud, and I can read it for you. What is a diversity statement? So if you have some idea, even an inkling, maybe you have some tangential information, let us know. So just go ahead and type it in the chat box, use raise hand, whatever you're comfortable with. Yes, Nazia?
As far as I know, diversity statement, because I've been in contact with Career Center and, applying for as one of the international belonging to a diverse background. So when I'm applying somewhere, I need to have my diversity statement in my resume, or with the CV, I'm applying to an organization. So that shows that where do I belong to, what skills do I bring, because I'm new in the market, but then again, I have my own diversity. It could be languages, it could be skills, it could be anything I bring with me. And then I'm presenting, like I'm writing it as we write with a resume or in the cover letter, something like that.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing. Definitely, your own, what you bring to the table, your own unique background, that's definitely part of it. Yeah, thank you for sharing so much. Is there anyone else that wanted to share?
I would like to
Yes,
share.
Miriam? Yes.
It is welcoming and including the people from different cultures in equal opportunities, in equal environment. So this is what I understand from diversity and from my studies also. Could you hear me?
Yes, yeah, great. Very succinctly said.
Welcoming and including different people from different cultures.
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
Opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, exactly. So, people from different cultures, people from different backgrounds, thank you for sharing. Is there anyone? Oh, yes, Nicole?
A little bit of my understanding is that like your diversity statement should kind of express how you could advance diversity for like an institution that you're applying for. I've had to do that for some like internships, kind of show how I can contribute to that advancement in equity and inclusion.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing. Exactly. That's a pretty big part of it. Is, how are you going to help the mission mission statement in terms of diversity or inclusion of that particular institution. So whether this is an academic institution, a place of education or not, how are you going to help further things? And I do see that Nikki shared in the chat. Let me see. An expression of personal approach and ethos around anti-racism, inclusion, and belonging that we bring to and strive to practice in the classroom. Yes, very good. Thank you. All wonderful ideas shared, all parts of a diversity statement. So thank you, everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. Well, before I start going through the slide, Michelle and Rose, is there anything that you wanted to add?
No, I mean, I believe that the students just really nailed it. Like there's a diversity statement is very personal too. And then at the same time, you're trying to kind of include not only your values, your ethics, your diversity, the inclusivity part, but like how you view through your lens, your own view of diversity and what that means for you and how you can contribute it to the organization. So yeah, I think as we delve a little bit further in, we'll have a better understanding, but I also understand that this is constantly evolving, just like everything else in your life. So what about you, Ro?
Yeah, I believe that DEI is actually something that's a little personal for everybody, depending on your background, your experiences, how you express yourself. So DEI, I do know that other people absorb those three acronyms, DEI, with another acronym, and we'll talk about it a little bit later as well. But this is something that's growing. It's kind of like a movement that's growing. It's been already accepted in a lot of areas. And I know that that Holly is going to talk about this, especially in the academia field, but in other fields, it's been growing. So it's really important that that diversity statement really does show your personal story and your experience as well.
Yeah, thank you. Wonderful. Yeah, thanks for adding. There's definitely the personal element. And the next question that I'm going to address is when might you need a diversity statement? So, in what situations? So normally you would need this when you're applying to something, when you're submitting paperwork for something. Some examples of what that might be would be graduate admissions. Some institutions for actual admission to usually a PhD program. Sometimes you'll be asked for this, sometimes even for a master's program, but it really does depend on the institution since that's sort of a newer thing. Fellowships, grants, other types of awards, occasionally, especially depending on the field, you may be asked for a diversity statement, especially if the fellowship is specifically intended for a certain group. So for example, if the fellowship says, this award is intended for individuals who have furthered diversity in their community, who have furthered access to business opportunities or education or whatever it may be for women, for example, right? So something like that. Postdoctoral positions, faculty positions, that's probably the most apparent or what someone might immediately think of when they hear of a diversity statement. So you're applying for a position as a professor. Promotion and tenure, so if you're requesting tenure, but also non-faculty positions and non-academic spaces. So that's specifically something that CPD will help out with. But as you can see, there are many different situations in which you may need a prepared diversity statement. Now they may vary, and we'll get into that. So why is a diversity statement important? So sure, you might need a diversity statement for these applications, but really, what is the institution or the organization that you're applying to or requesting something from? What are they wanting to see? Why do they think this is something that's so integral to your application? Well, first, it presents your position or approach in promoting inclusivity and equity. So how are you going to make this space that you're entering a more equitable space? It demonstrates your awareness of current issues of diversity and inclusivity in higher education, so specifically in academia, but also in professional spaces. You want to demonstrate that you know what's going on in the world, what are some current issues, what are some current concerns. You need to be aware of those things so that you make sure that you're interacting with people in an appropriate way. It also describes engagement in promoting and supporting diversity, inclusion, and equity in your research, teaching, and service. So whether this is a nonprofit space, whether this is a fellowship, a research position, et cetera, you need to show that you're engaged not only with the topic at hand, the research at hand, et cetera, but that you're going to be engaged with other, research fellows, team members, employees, faculty, et cetera, in a way that is appropriate and inclusive. And so it also shows a focus on diversity, that a focus on diversity increases accessibility and makes learners feel welcomed. So if you are applying to a faculty position or requesting tenure, you want to ensure that you are making all students feel welcome, that students can access the information that you're helping them with, the skills you're helping them build, that you're not excluding any students, and inclusivity is the key way to do that, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to CPD.
All right, thank you, Holly. So in addition to the things that Holly shared about academia, there are other definite career applications and work utilizations for a DEI statement, right? So on the left side, we have here applications. When you're applying to certain fields, like example, if it's a government agency, whether it's local, state, or federal, a lot of nonprofit organizations and large firms like law firms, medical firms as well, and also just jobs in general and education, they do all require DEI statements. I mean, some of the places that you're going to apply to, they actually just ask you, please submit a one-page DEI statement on our website. I also want you to know that, it may not apply to the people in this room, but if you have kids, students, if you're a teacher and educator, even the common application for colleges, they do require a diversity statement as well. So this is something that's been, it's starting to go on ever since our youth are actually being indoctrinated into writing diversity statements as well. So it's becoming part of popular culture. And, if you're going to apply to any, even like a Google or one of those larger companies that's well known, they do require diversity statements as well. how are these utilized in your workplace? And these are some various ones. One of my previous work institutions, I actually worked on a grant writing committee, and they really wanted to know, one of the questions when we applied for a grant was, what are the DEI initiatives of your company? So not just only your personal DEI statement, but also you have to be aware that DEI is part of your work as well, right? Part of the work mission statement, ongoing hiring processes, when they're taking tallies of certain people, they want to know this in the grant writing applications. Another part is your community impact. If you're working, let's say, on a nonprofit, and it does a lot of impact in the local communities, they would like to know that for data, so they can more effectively help those people further as well. And you can see here, like, your own personal online branding. For DEI initiatives, yes, you're writing a statement with words, but also your actions, what you post, what posts you view, those are all able to be seen by the public. And that does kind of paint a narrative, and you want that narrative to be DEI positive. Okay. And the last part here, evaluation for company policies. Some policies, they want to hit certain DEI standards or goals or qualifications, right? So I'm not sure what research you're going to be doing in the future, or what organization you'll be working for, but you have to realize that the evaluation of those policies may come into play, and it may cross over into your work as well. Okay, and I'll go to the next slide here. Michelle, you can take that one.
Yeah. And I think, just going back to the other slide really quick, I think what happens is, all of this started to kind of morph and change in the last 5 to 10 years. And there were a lot of people in our world that already had their internal embedded diversity statement, but now we're stepping into organizations that are requesting it. I think some of them do it just because they have to. They're feeling pressure to do it. But then some of them do it because they actually really want to understand who they're bringing into their culture, who they're bringing into their team. And it's okay to feel a little uncomfortable. I want to put that out there about, what is my diversity statement? It's just like, what is my mission? What is my philosophy in life? What are my values? What are my ethics? So if you haven't sat down and thought about it and written it out, don't beat yourself up. It takes some time to kind of figure out, like, who am I and how do I view diversity, but how do I embed it into my holistic life as a whole? So as you look at this slide, I'm going to take a little pause. I want to just see if anyone has questions, and give you a moment also to scan some of the QR codes to have it up there. Keep in mind that these slide decks will be on both of our websites, both PFF as well as Career and Professional Development. So if you don't get it today, it's not a big deal, and you'll have the recording. But before we move forward, does anyone have any comments, any thoughts as we're delving into this? We're on slide 10, so we've gone through a lot right now. Take your time. I got plenty of time. Or just take a water break. Okay, we do. Oh, that's the link, just in case someone missed it. Okay, so you can see here that some are nonprofits, some are law firms, some are the president's executive order. It's a variety of things here. And so as you start to navigate and you start to look at it, you can look at grant proposals. If you can write grants and learn to write grants, it gives you all the more power to write, which is fantastic. So, okay, we can click to the other slide. Ro, you want to take this, or you want me to?
You can start it, I'll comment.
Okay, good. Yeah. Professional considerations. This is really a really good one. It's interesting when you think of DEI and you think about the way that we interact with the world. And 2 slides ago, Ro had mentioned about your online presence, which is also called like a digital presence. And so when you're looking at how you want to engage with the professional world, it's really important for you to understand that these are your most productive waking hours. So when we go to work and we love our career and love what we do, these are, in a 24-hour day, these are the ones that we're most productive in. The other times at home and so on could be sleeping and getting ready for the next day. So think about the professional considerations as you move forward, but you really also want to look at the company culture. Is it going to fit me? This is not about them at this point. I want you all to hear that. When you go for an interview, you actually have more power than they do because you're the only one in that conversation that ultimately has to make the decision. You need to choose to stay in with the party or you need to leave. And so look at the mission of the company. Are they having you work 1,000,000 hours a week? You're like, oh yeah, I work 80 hours a week, but I make a great salary. Well, no, you don't, because you cut that salary in half. You really should be working about 40 hours a week in the United States. And then that's how much you're truly making. So think about the mission, like what's their value? Does it match your ethics and values? They do have diversity and inclusion programs. Some are private, some are public, some are in training and development, some are a part of the company and organization and the industry, and some are not. And so how you want to embed that, and if it's important to you at the level that it has to be embedded into your day-to-day operations, then make sure they have that. Okay, Ro, I'll leave the last two to you so we can
All right,
bounce.
thank you. All right. And this is actually really important for us. If you notice, just looking around this room, I believe we have 11 people in this room and 8 are women. So this actually plays a part into thinking about company culture as well. What type of company culture do I want to join as a woman, as a male, as, part of whichever DEI, subcategory that you actually identify with? Working for an effective leader, right? Does that person promote DEI initiatives or not? Does that company promote DEI initiatives or not, right? And also, everybody here is going to be become a leader, whether you are now or you evolve into a different role. You want to make sure that you're going to get adequate training, right? We're not taking roles where we just want to react to what's told us to do, right? We want to initiate, we want to grow, we want to get the appropriate training as well. So is this job going to be, does it have a good professional consideration in DEI initiatives for myself? The stat on the bottom here is more toward people for the, well, if you read it here, 78%. So about 80% of employees, 8 out of 10 people, especially in the tech industry, which is a very fast growing, and they use data a lot, but they said that, DEI initiatives are really important when considering a job offer. So even before you take that job, right, they're already considering, well, this company doesn't have the right culture for me or not. Company culture is something huge right now, especially after the pandemic. You see a lot of people, what do they call it now? The Great Resignation. A lot of people are leaving companies. Why? Right? If you're working for a great company, great DEI initiatives, you have growth, you wouldn't leave, right? So you have to figure that out. And if you go to a company that doesn't have a great DEI initiative and also very high turnover, you'd want to know why as well. You can see that number for the BIPOC community jumps 10% to 88%. So Black, Indigenous, people of color, that makes a huge difference for them as well, right? So almost 9 out of 10 people, if they belong to the BIPOC community, they're considering this. So basically everybody is considering these, these topics when they're going to make a decision on whether to work for a company or not. Anybody have any comments about this slide? Okay. All right, interesting. All right. So I think we can move along unless Michelle or Holly, you want to add anything?
I'm good for right now, but please ask us questions as we go. And if you're not comfortable asking questions in the group, we get it. So just message us privately, either on the chat or just wait and message us by email.
Yeah, thank you for noting that, Michelle. All right, so what are some key elements of a diversity statement? What are some points that would be contained within? So first, your own learning and development and perspectives. So again, as Michelle and Ro both mentioned, your own unique experience should be part of that. Definitely your voice, it should be professional, but your voice should still come through. How you interact with others in support of inclusive and equitable learning and development. So some examples, some interactions, some situations, some projects that you may have worked on in the past that related to inclusion, that related to diversity, etc. And your engagement in research, teaching, service, leadership, etc. Of course, this will depend on what type of application this is, whether this is for a fellowship, tenured position, company position, etc. But in general, how you engage with whatever that field may be, in terms of diversity, that's a major component. So your own experience, specific interactions or projects, and then interactions with larger organizations or fields as a whole. These are key elements of a diversity statement. So next we're going to talk about diversity specifically. So first, diversity is a descriptive term that refers to many elements of an individual's identity. So it's not, again, just one sort of, identifier. It's a multiplicity of identifiers that includes many disparate or associated qualities. Some well-known facets, so these are just some examples of concepts that would be included in the larger umbrella, of diversity, would be one's nationality, race, sexual orientation, disability, ability, neurodiversity. So things like chronic illness, all kinds of elements of one's experience, background, and identity. And I believe I missed age there. Somehow I didn't read that word, I'm sorry. Those are all elements of diversity, okay? So again, some people may just sort of limit it to one understanding, but really there are many ways you can approach this. In academia, for example, you could say, well, I, for example, started my journey in higher education a little bit later in life, right? Or I am a first generation student, I am chronically ill, etc. Those are identifiers or elements under the umbrella of diversity that some people maybe wouldn't think about immediately. I think sometimes people kind of limit it to one or two elements, and maybe sometimes they accidentally leave some concepts behind. Systemic biases can often manifest implicitly. So you need to consider, how are, certain biases against certain identifiers within the umbrella of diversity maybe appearing in ways that aren't so obvious. Again, because there are aspects to diversity, because there are identifiers in this greater umbrella that people maybe don't immediately consider, that can sometimes be an issue and can limit people to understanding how biases tend to come up. Does anyone have any comments or thoughts on diversity in terms of its definition, in terms of it being an umbrella term, etc.? No? Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and move on. So next, we're just going to briefly define and discuss equity. So equity is the result of removing barriers. It's essentially the concept of inclusive practices that create access and opportunity for a diverse range of individuals in any social space. Equity demands that we first recognize systemic barriers and then engage actively to create access and support engagement towards success. So this is the big thing about equity. In order for equity to occur, it's an ongoing process and it's an active process. So this is really, in a sense, equity is sort of, it requires action. So you have to continually question what biases are being manifested, what barriers to access are occurring, and you have to continually attempt to break those down to truly work towards an equitable environment. So equity is not something that might naturally occur in these social systems where we do have these biases, okay? And that leads into inclusion, which is really a very associated concept to equity. So to focus on inclusion is to focus on removing barriers that may prevent learning or ease of learning. So this is very similar to equity. Sometimes the two terms are used almost interchangeably, although equity has more of this sense of action, of justice, whereas inclusion is more thought of as this like resulting situation. But it still does require action. So as the second point says, inclusion is an action-based term. It requires changes to be made and design choices to be implemented. A good way to center inclusion in teaching, leadership, job training, and course design is to employ UDL. So if you haven't heard of UDL, I do suggest that you look into it. It is covered in the TNDY 430 or PFF 430 classes. It's a theory or approach to both teaching and leadership in other types of jobs. that essentially says that a space needs to be universally accessible from the get-go. Otherwise, it is working within biases and it's working to exclude learners or employees, et cetera. Yes, Nicole?
Do you by chance know if those classes are going to be offered in the spring?
Yes, they will be. I'm not 100% sure that both are going to be offered, PFF 430 and TNDY 430. I believe off the top of my head, they both will. Traditionally, we offer them every semester, even in summer. So at least one of them will be offered, and I'm almost 100% sure both of them will be. The only difference briefly between them is that PFF 430 is a free 0-unit pass-fail course, and TNDY 430 it has units, right? So if you are for example, a PhD student, most PhD students, they have to take like a TNDY course. So if you want that to fulfill your TNDY requirement, you could take that instead. But yes, they're both being offered in the spring.
Wonderful, thank you.
No problem. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on, and I'm going to pass it on to CPD.
Okay.
Can I
So,
say something really quick,
yes.
Ro?
Mhm.
Thank you, Holly. For those of you that just joined, we appreciate you being here, definitely, but don't panic. We will have the slide deck available. We also dropped it in the chat, but it'll be on both our websites. Just wanted to say that.
Thank you for that reminder, and that actually plays a part. If you notice what Holly was saying, the DEI, some of them, they have blurred lines between the words themselves because they share a similar goal, right? Well, the last word that another consideration is DEIA. A lot of companies adopt this A now, which is accessibility, right? How accessible are these DEI initiatives and programs to people that feel they need them, right? And this is actually embedded nowadays into the hiring processes, the even digital accessibility. Like example, everybody here, you definitely know about working from home. Well, some people, they don't have the technology or access to actually work from home, right? So there are certain things that a company does look for, and also individuals look for, that accessibility to these programs that a company is trying to offer in a DEI. And one thing that they're focusing a lot on is that the second bullet that I have here on the screen, the underserved broader communities that have been traditionally denied opportunities in economic, social, and civic life. So example, if you have a disability or you have you fall under neurodiversity, where you think, act a little differently, right? And some of the words that we use here are extrovert and introvert. Well, there's very different kinds, and there's people on different spectrums, right? And how they interact with other people in the workplace. Are they, do they have access to the same abilities that everybody else has, right? Or the same programs? Do they feel comfortable going to their manager or supervisor and saying, well, I need a ramp because I'm in a wheelchair, I need a ramp to the front of my building. You have a DEI initiative. Well, where's the accessibility portion of this? Because I can't get in. So this part is actually really important, and so important and growing so much so that there's an executive order now that says that now, especially for a federal agency, the supervisors have the right to evaluate certain opportunities and give a little bit more accessibility to people that traditionally have been denied opportunities before, right? And that can fall under a lot of different categories. However, they are now empowered with this right. And I have a legal background, so I did put that QR code toward that executive order just in case you want to switch, click that and read it yourself, because it does apply to everybody in this room as well. Okay. Michelle, did you want to add anything to that?
No, that was perfect. I do want to share with you that Ro is a lawyer. And so I was like, can you just take this slide? I think you're going to do much better than I am. And so he nailed it. So yeah, but please keep in mind that there's a lot of people in the world that are able differently, and we all are. And so we want to make sure that you take advantage of what makes you feel comfortable, but also understanding that there's certain rights that we have and what you want to share and express. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
And really briefly, before we go on to the next slide, first of all, I love this slide. This is great. So thank you so much, Ro, for sharing. And I just briefly want to say that, you know, you might think, okay, well, an institution, you know, should be accessible. That's good to know, but you know, I might not really affect the accessibility too much of a situation. And I just want to add that, you know, there are many ways that an individual can, you know, affect how accessible a certain space or moment is. So, well, on the one hand, you may think, well, I don't have a lot of power to decide whether or not a building has a wheelchair ramp or an elevator or whatever that may be. Let's say if you're an instructor and you're handing out a handout in class, so piece of paper, if that piece of paper has, let's say, green text on a pink piece of paper, that's not necessarily accessible for people with certain forms of color blindness. I think deuteranopia, particularly, I think, if I'm getting that right. So there are many ways that you may think, oh, well, I don't affect the accessibility of a situation, and really you do. So you want to think kind of outside of the box a little bit in terms of accessibility, about how you can sort of better a situation or make any given situation or space more accessible. All right, and so what are some diversity statement do's? So this is essentially just some advice for actually crafting your diversity statement. These are general guidelines. I just want to briefly say that specific institutions may give you different requirements. They may ask for additional things, less, etc. So just keep this in mind. These are generally what's accepted overall. So typically they are 1 to 2 pages, usually 1, but some institutions or organizations will allow you to go up to 2. You may need to adhere to word limits depending on the request. And the main thing is that you need to illustrate that you understand diversity in the context of eliminating structural inequities from a social justice perspective. So if you're writing your DEI statement and you're describing your personal background, but you're not necessarily addressing that you understand diversity and you understand equity, especially in whatever space it is or in relation to whatever it is that you're applying for, then you've certainly left something out. It's best, if you can, to address multiple facets of diversity. I wouldn't say it's necessarily required, but I think it's certainly a good thing if you can do so. So if, for example, you have a certain aspect of your own background that you bring into it, so let's say if you are chronically ill or a woman or a person of color, etc., and you bring that in, but you also worked on a project that was supposed to bring in accessibility to people who had various visual impairments for a certain job that you had, you could bring that in too, and those are 2 different aspects of identity or diversity, right? So if you can do that, that's certainly great. Does anyone have any comments or anything they've seen requested for diversity statements or noted before that they wanted to share?
I do have a comment. Sometimes on applications, it will just give you a certain word count. So be cognizant of that too. You may just have like a 250 word count or something. So you can write out a longer one, like when they say write out a long bio or a short bio. So just be prepared to have one that's a half a page as well. It just depends. The applications are all different. So yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, thank you. All right, and these are a few things that you should probably avoid. So some diversity statement don'ts. So the first one is, well, it's fine to include some aspect of your own identity that adds to diversity, you know, your unique experience, your personal experience. You don't want that to be your entire diversity statement. So if you're allowed, let's say if an institution says you can go up to 2 pages, and you have a page and a half, if the entire page and a half is comprised of you talking about your own identity, so let's say if you identify as queer and the entire piece is about your own queerness, but it doesn't necessarily address the institution you're applying to, specific experiences you've had in the past, other diverse groups you've worked with and helped, then it's too limited. So don't limit it just to your own experience, even though that is something you can include. Second, don't limit your discussion of diversity to a single aspect. So I've kind of already touched on this, so I won't talk about it too much anymore. But again, you want to try and include multiple aspects of diversity, multiple examples of equity if possible. And three, don't limit your diversity statement to purely theoretical topics. This is actually a pretty big one. When working on diversity statements or when helping students, in personal one-on-one like PFF meetings, that I've seen a bit is people will talk about everything theoretically in future terms, right? So they say, if, for example, I am granted this position at X university as a professor, I will, employ UDL and I will do XYZ, and that's good. But certainly if you have any past experiences, any concrete examples of things that you've done, that's always great. So don't limit yourself to just a theoretical discussion of diversity. Does anyone else have anything they wanted to add for some maybe advice on what to avoid, how to be careful when crafting your diversity statement, or any questions?
Yeah, it's such a touchy topic when it comes to that. So again, we're delving into something that is new in the sense that we haven't always expressed our diversity statement. Maybe we've always had them internally. Some of the things that jump out at me that employers still are hesitant about are politics and religion. And so when we think of diversity, we're also thinking of something like a holistic and not just bringing in ethnicity maybe. And so it depends on the organization and the industry. And so I can't really answer that question, but I can share with you when we work with employers, we still kind of avoid some of those areas. Yeah, we don't mix them. Ro, what do you think?
I agree because it's touchy because it's personal,
Mhm.
right? That's the main thing. And, people are not afraid, but are wary to kind of like, impose some type of initiative or an experience on another person as well. So I think that it is cautious. And even when we're doing like career counseling with other companies and stuff, we're actually careful about that too, because it has to be a fit between the candidate and the employer. And that fit may or may not agree with me either, right? So that's why we just have to be cognizant of the fact that people do have to make their own decisions here.
Yeah. But you also have,
I also agree with Michelle. Sorry, you can.
Miriam, you're breaking up, so talk loud, okay?
I am sorry. I interrupt you. You can continue.
You can type it in the chat if we can't hear you.
I mean, I agree with Michelle. Yes, it is right. I'm not, but for example, from my side, I never feel hesitation about the people. I feel hesitation not to stay on the goal for the institution or for the company within the diversity. From my perspective and my experiences, staying on the goal, staying on the aim or purpose is the most important one. So diversity is the only provides an environment for it.
Thank
Did you
you.
understand it? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, but you can also type it in the chat.
I will.
Yeah, because I think everyone could really benefit from this open conversation. Anything else, Holly?
No, thank you so much for sharing. So yeah, it is. I do agree also that depending on, of course, it's not exactly the same as certain professional environments or companies, but also in academia, depending on where you're applying, what institution you're applying, certain things are more likely to be acceptable in a diversity statement than others. And I certainly suggest that you reach out to people. You can always make an appointment with PFF or CPD or contact any of us if you have any specific questions. So for example, sometimes with PFF, we have students that say, I'm applying to a faculty or staff position at a religious institution, right? So there are schools or universities that are associated with particular religious groups like Catholic universities, et cetera. And they may not be sure, well, can I put in my diversity statement that I'm queer? Can I not do that? Is that good? Is that bad? And that can be a very complicated subject, right? Certainly, I would say consider whether or not you want to work at an institution where you might have to censor certain aspects of yourself that are a core element of your identity, right? That can be an issue. Make sure that, if possible, you may want to prioritize institutions that approach DEI in a way that is in agreement with your own identity, right? At least to a degree that you can work there. But that could be a complicated topic. So if you have any questions about specific institutions, I do encourage you to contact us or make specific appointments. And I do see comments in the chat. I never feel hesitation about people, but not staying on the goal and with the institution or company. Diversity is an environment to achieve the company's goal. Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. So these are some specific examples of what you can include in your diversity statement. So if you're struggling to fill a certain amount of space, if an institution says we want at least a page and you're struggling, here are some specific examples. So you could include an example of a time you helped increase accessibility in a job, internship, community position, student government position, etc. So even if maybe you think, well, I'm applying to this company, I'm applying to this nonprofit, to this university, and I really haven't had a job at this type of institution before. So I don't have experience upping inclusion at this type of, in this specific type of environment or business. Well, maybe you were on a student union, and maybe you were on a committee like a constitution committee, for example, like we have here at CGU, and maybe you were drafting a student bill of rights. Well, student bill of rights, or even a constitution committee in general, that really has inclusion right at the heart of it, because you're trying to figure out if all students can access the learning in the environment, right? So that's something that you could certainly add. Next, you could include a brief discussion of your own diverse background and or membership in diverse organizations. So we've already mentioned your own personal experience. But for example, if you're looking at academic positions, for example, and you belong to various academic institutions that focus on researching specific things that are related to diverse groups, such as, for example, there are like societies for disability studies. That's an actual academic institution. If you belong to that academic institution, that certainly is related to DEI. Next, you might include moments you were placed into diverse environments and learned from them. So you could say, for example, well, at this particular internship I had, I was working with remotely, and this company was located in Belgium or was located in Thailand, and so I was working with people who had a very different experience from myself, different nationalities. And I learned XYZ, this different approach to work, etc. So if you've been placed in a diverse environment and learned from it, definitely share that experience. And finally, you might include example of how your course designs, your syllabi, or your job training courses or pamphlets, etc. So not just in academia, but also in professional settings, how those things that you have created and you've worked on and crafted, how they include UDL, how they have a diverse approach, even if you've never had that position. So if you're applying as a professor and you've gone through the PFF program and you've made a syllabus, but you've never actually taught a course, well, you can still talk about that syllabus you've crafted. What is your attendance policy? What is your technology policy? Does your technology policy allow certain note-taking devices for people who are disabled or neurodivergent, and they need that? So really you're putting inclusion and accessibility at the core of your syllabus, and that's just one example. Ro, Michelle, did you have anything else that you wanted to kind of suggest for including?
No, I actually think that this slide is more of a summary of everything we kind of talked about too. So it just kind of brings it all back together. And it's been very detailed, and actually, quite frankly, this workshop has helped me too, because I'm always evolving and always trying to kind of figure out where that stance is in my life.
And just one thing, if you notice on every bullet, it's you, or your. It really is an expression of your overall story, right? And how you fit into a DEI initiative, or how DEI has played an important role in your life as well. So I do believe that this slide is actually reiterating that it's got to be personalized, right? One thing that Holly mentioned before is don't talk about theory. You know, if I get this job, I'll do this. It really is an expression of what you've already, you know, been part of. So I think that's really important. And that's a skill that you can talk with us about how to develop and in writing style, but it should really be about you.
Great, yeah, exactly. And is there anyone else that has any specific questions about things that you may or may not include, or any specific comments?
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
it might be slightly beyond the topic of today's talk, but as far as I have learned today from the social justice or more perspective, like DEI or DEIA is really important. But from the corporate perspective, especially those like for-profit firms, so like actively involving in DEI issues might negatively affect their performance, like for example, financial performance. So I'm wondering whether there are any like report that actually doing DEI benefits the firms. I just downloaded the DEI in Tech report. Probably I'll read it later, but if there are such report that doing DEI is actually benefiting those firms, it'll be much better and much more appealing to not just those aiming for like jobs in nonprofit or education or academia, but applying jobs in like companies. So I'm just wondering whether there are any such
Sure.
findings or reports.
That's a great question. Actually, most of the companies that require it, not industries, but companies, personal companies, are for profit. When you think about like Google and Yelp and other ones, those are for-profit companies that are actually requesting it. And like I had mentioned earlier, there's an expectation now that they do, but I also think that I'm going to change the subject a little bit, but this will make some sense. The college application process completely shifted this last 2 years when they decided to eliminate the SAT and ACT for the students. And it brings in a lot when it comes to diversity, because we knew that scholars of color and students were not able to perform as well the majority of the time on those standardized tests. And so they saw this huge change in the students that they brought into their institutions. So it's the same idea, Shin, when you think about it, that when companies begin to wake up and embrace diversity, and if you can think of it as like a combination pizza, like all the slices have a different meaning, but bring diversity together as a holistic goal, they're going to enhance their production. So it's something to Google. I don't know how much is out there yet, because if they're doing longitudinal, they don't have the information. But if they're doing just something that's more acute, yeah, it may already be out there. But really, really good, good question. I don't have any studies offhand, but it's something that Google does. I can guarantee you can ask Google, because they have everything.
Oh, thank you. Can I just speak just 30 seconds? The reason I asked this question is like I'm doing research on corporate social responsibility and just thinking how that actually benefits firms like financially.
Yeah.
Because after the roundtable like statement like 2-3 years ago back, actually not many companies are actually implementing that in their operation or management or business. So I'm just concerning whether DEI like is becoming very popular and becoming more important nowadays, and I'm just concerning whether our focus on DI might go down if that doesn't lead to corporate performance. So yeah, just
That's
I
a
hope
great
that.
study for you.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it might be a conversation you have with your peers and your the faculty as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's go ahead and finish up, because I know everyone must be going soon. I don't want everyone to miss there. Yes, there is
Yeah.
history. Thank you. I can do this one, Ro. In closing, well, one, thank you for being here. Like a really great conversation with everybody on there. There is a poll going through right now. We do want you also to understand that we have, both of our offices have the link tree. When you click on this little site, it takes you to everything that we offer in the sense of like our Instagram and our social media accounts, to our website, to our services and so on. And then there's a little bit.ly there too for all of that. The next slide, and I think Ro's controlling that right now, but the next slide that you'll see that will pop up soon as you do your poll is the current professional development team. We always like to highlight our students because they're so awesome. 2 in our office, Ro and I are the professional staff members, and then the rest are our student support staff team. And so I'm grateful to work with such brilliance, but such authentic people. It's been amazing. So I always like to share their story. And then the last slide is just more awesome events that are coming up. As I had mentioned, Thrive is this Saturday, which is tomorrow. It's actually in 11 hours no, not 11 hours. I'm sorry, that'd be tonight, 23 hours. I need some sleep. And then, then we have the CPT OPT workshop for international students in collaboration with SLDL, the Marketing and Leadership Experience, and so on. So please join us, and you can just hop right on that QR code. And I want to take a couple seconds to say thank you to Holly. Such a pleasure. We've had an opportunity to connect with her twice now, and it's always been a wonderful pleasure. So thank you, Holly. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you. And I just want to, I want to thank both of you as well. I think adding this sort of professional dimension is really essential, because even though people do think of diversity statements, I think a lot of people think of academia, I think it's becoming really important in all kinds of fields. So I really appreciate it, because I'm certainly not an expert in that. And so I think it adds something really important. And I want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you for taking the poll. It's always great to get feedback and try and, see what areas of CGU we're reaching out to, which ones we need to reach out to more, and how to better our webinars. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much. If anybody has any questions or comments that they want to share in closing, please feel free.
And then feel free to reach out to us. You can schedule appointments with us and all of those things. So, and have a great weekend.